Incoming message.
All right, let's just get right into it. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're zooming in on the year 2026. Now, I know what you're thinking. Usually when we hear about specific future years and massive global risks, it's super easy to just tune out, right? We are totally used to science fiction, wild speculative theories, or just overblown catastrophizing. But this explainer, it's going to be entirely different. We are digging into the strict scientific reality of 2026. This is a year that features a verified, thoroughly documented alignment of 3 major space weather and astronomical events. So I'm going to walk you through the data, step by step, exactly like a research scientist would lay it out for a government oversight committee.
And honestly, that brings us to the guiding principle for this entire analysis. These aren't predictions. These are facts. I want to be absolutely 100% clear right out of the gate here. Nothing, and I mean nothing, we are examining today is speculation. Every single data point, every warning, and every astronomical event we discuss comes directly from public, verified sources. We're talking NASA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, and published peer-reviewed scientific research. We are not dealing with fear-mongering today. We're dealing with standard, rigorous scientific monitoring.
So here is our roadmap for today's briefing. We're going to cover the 2026 warning, look at some historical baselines, dive into Solar Cycle 25, talk about tracking near-Earth objects, assess our modern infrastructure vulnerabilities, and finally, we'll wrap up with the big preparedness question. Starting off with Section 1, the 2026 Scientific Warning. Let's look at this convergence of threats. Global space agencies are currently actively tracking a very specific convergence of 3 distinct things: a forecasted solar maximum, numerous asteroid flybys, and elevated geomagnetic storms. You see, science doesn't just happen in a vacuum. If we chart this chronologically, it tells a real story. We start with the massive baseline events of 2003. Then we mark the kickoff of our current solar period, Solar Cycle 25, in 2019. From there, we have to look at a highly documented, incredibly close call in July of 2025. And all of that math points directly toward a projected peak alignment in 2026. What this timeline shows us is that we're tracking an active, ongoing progression. It's not just some sudden, random event popping out of nowhere. Moving to Section 2, the 2003 Halloween storms. This is our historical baseline.
Look, if we really want to understand what a geomagnetic storm can actually do to Earth, we don't even have to guess. We just have to look at the historical record. Back in the fall of 2003, a series of massive solar storms battered our magnetosphere. It knocked out localized power grids, physically melted down massive terrestrial transformers, and caused billions of dollars in damage across the northern hemisphere. To really picture this, think of a simple analogy. When a giant cloud of magnetized solar energy slams into our planet, it induces immense electrical currents deep in the ground. It's basically like a massive invisible magnetic tsunami that pushes raw, uncontrolled electricity straight through our fragile power lines. It completely overwhelms those transformers exactly the same way a massive surge of high-pressure water would just burst a fragile pipe. It is a physical, incredibly destructive force.
Which brings us to Section 3, Solar Cycle 25 activity and our escalating solar threats. So those 2003 storms happened during a previous cycle, but our current conditions are escalating really rapidly. The sun actually goes through natural, roughly 11-year cycles of magnetic activity. Solar maximum is literally just the scientific term for the predicted period of greatest, most intense activity within that 11-year loop. We officially entered Solar Cycle 25 back in 2019. And if you look at NASA's official published forecasts, the solar maximum for this cycle, the absolute peak of this volatile solar activity, is predicted right around 2026. Now, when the sun gets active like this, it throws 2 main threats at us, and it is absolutely vital to understand the difference. First, you have solar flares. These are intense bursts of electromagnetic radiation. You can think of them like a massive, blinding camera flash traveling right at the speed of light. In fact, in January alone, the sun fired off 3 extreme X-class flares. But the real physical danger, that lies in coronal mass ejections, or CMEs. A CME is a billion-ton cloud of actual solar plasma and magnetic fields violently ejected into space. So if a flare is a flash of light, a CME is a literal cannonball. To really put the threat of these massive plasma cannonballs into perspective, let's look at a remarkably recent data point from July 2025. A major, heavily documented CME crossed our orbital path and missed hitting Earth by just 9 days. Now, in astronomical terms, that is literally a bullet grazing our cheek. Scientific consensus states that had this plasma cloud made a direct impact, the resulting magnetic interference would have disabled critical satellites all across North America. This isn't ancient history, folks. This is an active, ongoing scientific reality that we narrowly avoided.
All right, Section 4, Near-Earth Objects, or Asteroid Tracking. So, the solar maximum isn't the only metric scientists are actively watching for 2026. Global space agencies, using these massive public orbital tracking databases, are also closely monitoring the sky for physical astronomical bodies getting close to our planet. By scientific definition, a near-Earth object, or an NEO, is basically a comet or asteroid that's been nudged by the gravity of nearby planets into an orbit that brings it into Earth's immediate neighborhood. Tracking them is wild. It involves incredibly complex orbital algorithms that are constantly calculating and then recalculating their trajectories as they whip through space.
And for 2026, the official tracking data shows a pretty staggering number, 17. Yep, 17 officially recognized near-Earth objects are predicted to pass closer to Earth than our own moon. Now, look, in the grand, vast scale of space astronomy, objects passing near Earth isn't entirely unusual. But having 17 distinct bodies crossing within lunar orbit in a single calendar year, that is a highly notable data point in this 2026 convergence.
Out of those 17, 3 NEOs are currently being actively tracked for impact probability. Now, let me pause here. As I mentioned at the top, I want to keep the strict professional tone of a research scientist right now. This specific tracking is absolutely not a doomsday prediction, and it is certainly not meant to freak anyone out. This is standard scientific protocol. These objects are being closely monitored because orbital mathematics at millions of miles away require constant tweaking and refinement. The database for this is entirely public. You can go look it up yourself right now. It's simply a matter of documented, verified astronomical observation.
Section 5, Modern Infrastructure Vulnerabilities. Our hyper-connected systems. So how would our modern world actually handle these verified threats? Well, to answer that, we really have to contrast our current reality with our 2003 baseline. Back in 2003, during those Halloween storms, the grid took billions in damage, sure, but the 2003 grid was way more localized, and we had a significantly lower dependency on digital tech. Contrast that with the grid of 2026. Today, our infrastructure is a hyper-interconnected digital web. We have a massive foundational reliance on orbital satellites for literally everything, from basic communications to global financial transactions. And honestly, the most critical part is that our modern systems operate on maximum efficiency, which unfortunately means we have way less redundancy built in. A failure in one node cascades so much faster today than it did 2 decades ago.
Because of this hyperconnectivity and lack of backup redundancy, scientists are issuing a stark warning. If a massive Carrington event-scale geomagnetic storm, meaning a massive CME making a direct impact during this upcoming solar maximum, were to hit our 2026 grid, it could completely overwhelm and destroy terrestrial electrical transformers on a systemic scale. We are not talking about a brief afternoon blackout here. We are looking at the possibility of power infrastructure being disabled for months in the affected regions, while specialized massive transformers have to be manufactured from scratch and replaced. The probability of an event this extreme in any given year is low, yes, but the threat is thoroughly documented and our vulnerability is absolute.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 6, the preparedness question. Are we ready?
Let me reiterate that quote that grounds this entire explainer. The scientists who study these things aren't making predictions, they're monitoring known threats. NASA, NOAA, OA, and the global space agencies are out there doing their job. They're tracking the solar flares, they're crunching the asteroid math, and they're publishing the hard data on grid vulnerabilities. They are really hoping these documented threats don't align perfectly in 2026, but they're giving us the exact data of their convergence anyway. But here's the thing. While the scientists monitor the skies, the burden of actually surviving a prolonged grid failure, that falls directly on us at the community and household level.
Based on the data we just walked through, the gaps in our global systemic readiness are pretty immense. So practical, personal preparation for a prolonged utility outage is just essential. You really need a household checklist. Prioritize securing simple things, enough non-perishable food and potable water to last several weeks. You've got to secure off-grid communications, like getting a hand-crank emergency radio. Make sure you have physical copies of your essential documents saved and protected. Look into backup power requirements like solar generators just to keep your essential home electronic devices running. And honestly, most importantly, start building community support networks because localized cooperation is exactly how people survive a cascading failure.
The science clearly states that the risks are real and they are documented. So the final question isn't whether a massive event will eventually strike our fragile grid. The question is, when the lights go out and stay out, what is your plan?
Come to me, chickens! Cock-a-doodle-doo!